Hello, everyone. It's Risky here, back at it again. And you might be wondering why I got these guys on the screen here, but today we are going to be talking about the 2015 NFL Draft class, which was a class that, let's just say, it wasn't too good. But the biggest thing about this class was the two quarterbacks coming into this. People, in my opinion, this might have been the most controversial two quarterbacks in this class. And the reason why is because in most draft classes, people usually know who the number one quarterback is. Yeah, we just had Trevor Lawrence, Kyler Murray, 18 people knew it was Baker Mayfield, yada yada yada, etc. But in this class, it wasn't too easy. A lot of people had Winston, a lot of people had Mariota. In my opinion, I had Mariota at the time. I just thought he was a smarter quarterback, didn't make as many dumb decisions, but as we have 6 years later, as we have Winston, who was competing for a job, just won the starting job actually for the Saints. And we got Marcus Mariota, who's now the backup to the Las Vegas Raiders. Which this could kind of tell you just how the 2015 NFL class really went with most of these guys in the first round and most of these guys in the draft. Let's get to another comparison that was heavily brought up in this draft. Yes, we got the famous wide receiver comparison here. On the right, we got Kevin White, West Virginia receiver. And on the left, we got Amari Cooper, Alabama receiver. These guys were really neck and neck with each other. The Raiders were the ones who needed the wide receiver, and they're the first team on the clock who needed basically a wide receiver. Everyone knew the Raiders were going to take a receiver. No one knew who was going to be. A lot of people were predicting Amari Cooper, which was the pick. Kevin White we will talk about later in this video, I felt like wasn't as good as Amari Cooper at that time. But listen, this is just to give you guys a reminder of this NFL draft class. Now let's get into the actual class. Here we got the NFL draft class right here. As we talked about the first two quarterbacks, of course. Then we go down to Dante Fowler, who I'm not going to speak too much on every player. I'm just going to give you a little reminder. Drafted by Jacksonville, didn't really do much. Now on a different team, of course. I think last time we found him, he was on the Falcons. So remember that. Amari Cooper, who was a guy who had his struggles in the beginning with the Raiders. And then I think 2016 had to be his breakthrough year. And then later on, 2 years later in 2018, he was traded to the Dallas Cowboys. Brandon Sheriff, who's been he was marked as a tackle, moved into guard, who's been solid for Washington. I think he had a little bit of injury throughout like the last year or two. So I would say Amari Cooper and Brandon Sheriff were very good picks in this draft class. Dante Fowler was not. Dante Fowler was a bust. Then here comes Leonard Williams, who was a guy I had a lot of people say was the best defensive player in this draft class. He was a big defensive end from USC, a guy who was actually able to get pressure during college, but couldn't do that much in the pros. He was a guy who was on the Jets, traded into the Giants about 2 years ago, and had a breakthrough year last year and got a new contract. I'm not going to say that he's a great player because of 1 year. I would need to see more out of him before I could officially call this pick. Then we got Mr. Kevin White, who was a guy who didn't really play much throughout his career. He's a guy who was just battled through injuries most of the time. And a guy, as you guys can see right here with the stats, only had 25 catches. Only had 25 catches for only 285 yards. Did not catch a touchdown in his career. Only played in 17 games. Then we got Vic Beasley, who's an outside linebacker who went to Atlanta, who was a solid outside linebacker for Clemson. He was able to get pressure in college, which was good. They didn't really use him as an outside linebacker, mostly dropping back in coverage. But he's a guy who couldn't bring that into the pros. He was a guy who didn't get much pressure, only getting 37.5 sacks, which may look like a lot, but when you actually break down by season, he had that one good season where he went to the Pro Bowl, and that was it. Eric Flowers, who is a true meaning of a bust. That's all I'm going to say. Todd Gurley, who was, if you guys must know Todd Gurley. Todd Gurley was one of the best running backs, if not the best running back in 15, 16, 17. But now, as you guys know, I think he's a free agent now. I want to say he's with the Falcons, I believe, or he's a free agent, but he was also battling through knee injuries. And I'm going to go a little bit faster with this, of course. Trey Waynes wasn't that good of a corner. Danny Shelton was not a good nose tackle. Andres P was a solid tackle. I will give him that. He was a very solid tackle. That was a good pick. As we all know, the Saints were really great drafters. Devontae Parker, bad pick. Melvin Gordon, bad pick. Kevin Johnson, bad pick. Aaron Armstead, who is a very solid defensive tackle. I would not call that a great pick at all, in my opinion. I'm just saying he's a great defensive. Not great, but he's a very good defensive tackle. My bad. He was great in college. I loved him at Oregon, but he's not on the Niners anymore. He's now on the Colts. Now let's get into Marcus Peters, who's a very good corner, very solid corner. But the reason why I would say it was a bad pick because Kansas City got rid of him a year or two afterwards. They did not keep him long term. To be a good pick, you need to also have longevity with that pick. You either need to play very great or have longevity, which he played very good, but I would not put him at great. Cameron Irving, bad pick. Nelson Aguilar, bad pick. Cedric Ogbuai, I forget how to pronounce his name, but that was a bad pick. Bud Dupree, I would not call a bad pick, but he was not the edge rusher that I think Steelers fans hoped for or wanted. He was a guy who had very inconsistent years. Some years he had a good number of sacks, and some years he just didn't. Shane Ray, which was a bad pick. DJ Humphries, who is still on Arizona, but he is not really that good of a tackle. He kind of reminds me a little bit of Eric Fisher, where these are guys who've been on their team for a while, but these guys aren't anything great or really that good. But they are solid tackles. Nothing great, nothing that good, but they are solid tackles. Jack Thompson, who is a solid linebacker, but nothing great, I would say. Rashad Perryman, bad pick. Byron Jones, who was a solid pick, who I think he was drafted actually as a safety and then moved over to corner. And I think it was a good move. He was only with the team, I would want to say, for 2 or 3 years after he just got traded. Or no, he was a free agent and then he went to Miami. But I would call that a solid pick. Laken Tomlinson, not that good of a pick. Philip Dorsett, not a good pick. Demarius Randall, not a good pick. Stephon Anthony, Malcolm Brown, these guys are not good picks. There was really not that many good picks in the first round. We go to the second round. As we go look, Landon Collins. I'm just gonna bring out guys who I just remember, or just talk about guys here and there. Landon Collins had a solid 1-2 seasons in the league. Devin Smith, bust. Dorio Green Beckham, who a lot of people had high expectations for him, a bust. Devin Funches was a bust. Jalen Collins, bust. Bernard McKinney, who really only had like 1, maybe 2 solid seasons, bust. Eric Kendricks, who is a solid middle linebacker. Jaquavius Tart, who is a solid safety, nothing great, but a solid safety. Bust. Mitch Morris, who is a solid center now. Nothing great, but Ronald Darby, who had like 1 good year. Bust. Amir Abdullah, bust. Max Williams, bust. Rob Harveston, who is a solid right tackle, nothing great. Marcus Golden, who had, I would say, like maybe 2 good years. Bust. Ali Marpet, who is a solid guard. I'll call that a good pick. Frank Clark, not a great edge rusher now for what team is he on? I think he's on the Niners now. Or no, the Chiefs, my bad. Daquan Smith, bust. AJ Can, I'll call him a bust. He really wasn't that good. But like, hear me out. A lot of people aren't gonna call these guys bust because they're late round picks. But what I see is bust, and I just see bad players. I just need to get that out. Clive Walford, bust. Tyler Lockett, great pick. Jalen Strong, bust. Tevin Coleman had 1 good year. Duke Johnson, bust. Like, this draft class really doesn't have that many good players. Jordan Hicks, who's solid. Daniel Hunter, who's a really great edge rusher, very underrated. And there's no one else here that I would say was very good. Let's go into the next round. Trey Flowers, solid pick. I'll give him that. Jamison Crowder, who's been a solid receiver throughout the years. Darius Smith, who has established himself as a really good edge rusher for the Green Bay Packers. Quan Alexander, a linebacker who had, I would say, one good year, and then I think he got hurt and then went downhill after that. Shaq Mason, solid offensive lineman. Grady Jarrett, solid defensive tackle for the Falcons. But the best pick, in my opinion, throughout the draft, a guy who I want to talk about, is Stefan Dicks. Stefan Dicks, fifth-round receiver, who really established himself in the first preseason on special teams. If you guys remember, his first punt return took it, I think, like 20, 30 yards. Like, he was a guy who, from the start, was making big plays. But Brett Hundley Buzz, like, most of these guys aren't that good. Some of these guys are still in the league, and it doesn't mean that like, oh, these guys must be good. They're still in the league. No, I don't think that way. Where if a guy's still in the league, they aren't a buzz. I'm sorry. But yeah, well, let's just keep going through Quandre Diggs, who is a solid safety now. Nothing great, nothing really that good. Austin Ryder, okay center. Trent Brown, who is a solid tackle, I'll give him that, but didn't do much for the Raiders. And that's basically this draft. The draft was nothing great. And you guys might be like, oh, you were just naming some guys. Oh, it can't be that bad. You were just naming some guys. I'm going to show you guys a statistic that will probably change your mind after I just said this. Now let's get to that statistic now. So here's a statistic that I went back to 2009 with, and it basically shows AP, which stands for All Pro, PB stands for Pro Bowl, and ST I was going to do stuff for primary starter, but it just made no sense for me to do that. So let me just get rid of that. But the whole point of this is basically just, let's take a look at the 2015 draft right here. As you see, he has 9 All-Pro appearances and 45 Pro Bowl appearances. And that's with all players combined. So if there's a guy who's 6 and the guy with 5, that's 11 I counted. And All-Pros, there's a guy with 3 and a guy with 2, that's 5 combined. Which you guys might not think it's a good way to go about this, but let's just take it as an example. 2009 wasn't that good as you only had 6 All-Pros and 54 Pro Bowls. And it might be like, well, that's similar numbers to 2015. But the thing about 2009 is there was a lot of solid players who are still in the league today, or are guys who at least made a good impact on the game. There was guys like Matt Stafford, who I think would be a better player than any of these 2015 players in this draft. Let's just be honest here. I think Michael Crabtree was in that draft. Malcolm Jenkins, I think, was also in that draft. So, okay, let's calm down. 2010, 32 All-Pro, 125 Pro Bowl appearances. 2011, 30 All-Pro, 109 Pro Bowl appearances. Great. 2012, 27 All-Pro, 92 Pro Bowl. 2013, which it did take a dip with it, which is another draft class I would say that wasn't that good, 2013, which was 17 All-Pro appearances with 74 Pro Bowls. 2014, which was another solid draft class. If you guys look by the numbers, might not, but 13 All-Pro appearances, 76 Pro Bowls. We're going on it is somewhat declining, but it is still really good numbers. Then we get to 2015, where you got 9 All-Pro appearances and 45 Pro Bowls, which is very bad. It is so bad that if you look at the next upcoming 3 years, 2016 you got more All-Pro appearances and more Pro Bowls. 2017, which there is a 2-year difference now, where you have more All-Pro appearances and more Pro Bowls. Even in 2018, which is a 3-year difference, where you have more All-Pros, you do have less Pro Bowls, but that's also a 3-year time period where players have 3 more years to go through it. You give 2018, I would say, a few more years, and I think it could beat them Pro Bowl, but they still have more All-Pro players than 2015. That's going to be my biggest argument right there. That right there, that is my biggest argument. How they have the least amount of All-Pros and Pro Bowls. They, in my opinion, they still have the least amount of Pro Bowls. Of course, there's 2018, but 2018, that's also a 3-year difference. Now, I'm going to be honest, this really just concludes the video. Nothing much. I just feel like I need to get this off my chest, to be honest. I saw someone trying to defend this draft class on Twitter, so I was like, let me just make this. I'm gonna do another draft video, to be honest, about probably one of these drafts. You guys could take a guess, but I will go a lot more into detail than this one. This one was just a quick video I made just to give my thoughts and opinion, a little facts about the draft. And if you like it, please subscribe. If you don't, just like it, please. Come on, like, what are you guys doing? Like, please subscribe, comment your own opinions about the draft class or who your team picked, and see ya.